She was a Chinese-American woman who broke boundaries, pioneering anti-trafficking activists who saw a social injustice and decided to do something about it.
They say I don't act right, it's unladylike, how I wanna live my life.
1912, San Francisco, California. 25-year-old Tye Leung Schulze was hailed as the first Chinese-American woman to cast a ballot in a U.S. election.
At that time, women didn't have the right to vote in America, but in 1911, California, a very forward-thinking state, gave women the right to vote. She took it very seriously.
My first vote? Oh yes, I thought long over that. I studied. I read about all your men who wish to be president. I think we should not vote blindly, since we have been given this right.
Tye Leung Schulze was born in 1887 in San Francisco's Chinatown. The youngest of 8 children, her parents were working-class immigrants from China.
Chinese immigrant men who initially labored on the railroads or in the gold mines ended up in this very confined ghetto of Chinatown. Chinese immigrants faced deep racism and widespread violence across the West. For example, 18 Chinese men were lynched in the early 1870s, and there were fires and widespread violence.
My father's income was $20 a month working in a shoe shop. My mother helped at a boarding house. I would go to gambling houses to get the leftovers from their meals to feed our family.
Growing up, Leung Schulze attended a mission school where she converted to Christianity and learned English.
At age 9, her parents, following the Chinese custom, essentially sold her as a child servant to another family, which was not unusual at that time. Working in households, doing minor tasks like cleaning, and then when they came of age, they would often end up in the brothels.
In 1899, when she was 12 years old, Leung Schulze was to be married to an older Chinese man in Montana.
It was not unusual for Chinese families to have arranged marriages, to be sent off as a mail-order bride, and Tye wanted none of that.
At that time, I didn't know what was what. I was still too young. I refused.
Leung Schulze ran away to a shelter run by Donaldina Cameron, a white missionary committed to rescuing Chinatown's women and girls.
Donaldina Cameron, was often seen in these brothel raids wielding a fire axe to break down the doors. And because of my grandmother's ability to speak both languages, she was asked to come along on these raids to help interpret and assure the Chinese girls they were rescuing that it was safe for them to come.
With help from Leung Schulze and other staff, over the course of 3 decades, Cameron succeeded in rescuing 3,000 Chinese women and girls from trafficking. In 1910, Leung Schulze became the very first Chinese-American woman to work for the federal government. She was hired as an interpreter at the newly opened Angel Island Immigration Station.
Angel Island was, in one sense, a way to enforce the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which was intended to severely restrict Chinese immigration to the United States with the idea that the Chinese were taking jobs from white Americans. It was the first time that a single ethnic group was targeted for exclusion from immigration to the United States. Angel Island processed tens of thousands of Chinese immigrants under very harsh and sometimes very inhumane conditions, held for weeks or months at a time without due process. Tye Leung would help screen potential immigrants and particularly keep an eye out for women who were trafficked.
It was a very scary and often intimidating experience. So my grandmother was really a touch of home, a touch of security. She really provided a lot of comfort as she interpreted for them during these interrogations.
At Angel Island, Leung Schulze met and fell in love with Immigration Inspector Charles Schulze.
Here you have this imposing 6'3" German, and my grandmother, this tiny Chinese lady, 4'4", 4'5". What an amazing sight that must have been. But they had to keep it quiet because there was open prejudice against mixed marriages. It was illegal in the state of California.
In 1913, the couple eloped to Washington State, one of the few in the country where interracial marriage was legal.
His mother and my folks disapprove very much. But when two people are in love, they don't think of the future or what might happen.
The marriage cost them their jobs at Angel Island, and both found it difficult to find steady work. They lived on the outskirts of Chinatown with their 4 children.
Tye learned how to do bookkeeping and eventually found a nice career as one of the operators at the Chinatown Telephone Exchange.
After World War II, with the War Brides Act of 1945, the U.S. Immigration Office hired Leung Schulze again as an interpreter for the wives of Chinese-American servicemen. The Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed during World War II, but more open immigration from China did not occur until passage of the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act.
Tye Leung Schulze was working at a time of extreme anti-immigration sentiments in this country. She quietly fought against it. And I think we have to look at her as our forebearers, people who saw an environment that was not right and worked to correct that.
The thing that really inspires me about my grandmother was that she was always a champion of human rights and of women's rights. She was really the true definition of a folk hero that did things for the community without any need for recognition. And that's really the epitome of being a public servant.
I spent my life interpreting for people who needed my help. Doctors, attorneys, courts. I learned a lot through experience. We are all human.